Welcome to the Father Leo Show, where I am dishing out faith, culture, and commentary. And in this episode, I'm going to respond to a Catholic person who emailed me, and this person is voting for Kamala Harris. And I'd like to offer my response to this person, and also to share with you not who to vote for. I'm not endorsing any candidate, but I'm going to apply some principles on how you can take your Catholic faith from the church and bring it to the world, your family, and yes, even to the voting booth. But before we do that, please make sure you like, subscribe, share, and comment. All of this helps us to overcome all of the algorithms that want to suppress Catholic content, especially Catholic content when it comes to voting. And please make sure that you visit the Patreon community, and you can subscribe at any level. And this gives us a chance to really interact with you more personally, but it also supports us, because without your support, we won't be able to have a show like this, which is really just providing you a Catholic perspective as faithful as possibly can be presented with all of the topics of the modern world. Not anyone is really talking about it in a way that hopefully brings people together rather than tearing people apart. And I will say that an episode like this is going to come across as me endorsing a candidate. I am certainly not doing that. I'm simply providing you Catholic perspective so that you can take your faith to the voting booth. And why? Because if atheists can do it, so can you. If socialists and communists and ignorant, uninformed opinions can go to the voting booth, let's respond by having a properly formed conscience. And all of this took place simply because of the Al Smith dinner, which happened, on October the 17th in New York City. I'll explain all of that, but let's just jump right into it now with a Catholic response to another Catholic voting for Ms. Harris. So again, all of this was in response to the Al Smith dinner, which is hosted by the Archdiocese of New York, and it was named after a man, Al Smith, who was in the political world and also a philanthropist. And the proceeds go to Catholic Charities, which does a tremendous amount of social good for the Catholic Church in New York City. But it also gives the candidates a platform to show that they're human, that they can eat together even if they disagree with each other. And in a more kind of lighthearted fashion, they're allowed to roast the other candidate. And it's all in good fun. And it's been part of the political scene. And I'm just so grateful that Al Smith was not only a philanthropist, but he was taking his Catholic faith and injecting it into the political world. And it's the only time when you see the two candidates sitting next to each other, with at least the Archbishop of New York, Cardinal Dolan, in between them, showing that even though we have major differences, we can at least share a meal together, and we can at least talk with each other, and we can even have a laugh at our own expense. And why? Because we're not supposed to be 100% scripted all the time. And unfortunately, Ms. Harris's campaign said that she wasn't able to come because she was too busy campaigning. So instead, they had a very highly produced and highly scripted 2 to 3 minute skit using a Saturday Night Live character who was supposedly a Catholic girl student. And I got to tell you, I watched it. It was unfunny, and it was awkward, even more awkward than that governor of Michigan giving a Dorito like Holy Communion to someone. There really is an anti-Catholic sentiment that's coming from one of the parties, and it's really quite sad, even to the point where, again, the ladies from The View had their own opinions about this Al Smith dinner, simply because President Trump was the only one who showed up, and he had about 30 minutes to present his case in the form of jokes. And to be honest with you, some of the jokes were hysterical, and even some self-deprecation. And at one point he even said, now it's time for me to make fun of myself or something like that. He says, but why would I do that when I have the whole media cycle attacking me and already telling me how terrible I am? So it really is a time to just be funny, especially in a time when people don't know how to laugh anymore. But here's what the ladies from The View said, and then I'm going to jump into the letter.
Thank you, Cardinal Dolan, for this wonderful moment. So is this Catholic Church event normalizing a guy who's already broken 11 of the 10 commandments? Yeah. What do you think?
I think so. You know, I hate to break with tradition, because this is a tradition, and it's a tradition to have both presidential candidates come to this particular dinner. But sometimes there's a time to break tradition. You can't have a felon, a liar, a serial cheater. You know, he had Melania next to him, his third wife, who he cheated with Stormy Daniels on while she was pregnant. I think he stands against everything and flies in the face of everything that a Catholic believes and holds dear. He is not a faithful man.
Okay, there you have it. The experts of The View pontificating. They really are a sad group of commentators. You know, I don't want to say the word women because their party doesn't actually know what the definition of a woman is. That's even more sad. And what's crazy is that they look to the personal life of a politician, which is fine because it's definitely subject to scrutiny. But if you take a look at Ms. Harris's past life, she wasn't no saint either. And it's just odd to see how hypocritical people can become, so blinded to their devotion to a party or the personality that the media tells us we're all supposed to love, that they don't see their hypocrisy. It's really quite sad. But I also know that while the ladies on The View say what they say, because I do think they believe it, but they're also getting paid a lot of money to be controversial. I have to say that there are some people in the world who really don't know all of the facts, and it kind of comes out in the way they sometimes respond to me when they think that I'm trying to endorse a candidate. This was not the Catholic Church giving Trump a platform. This was the Catholic Church trying to show how two parties, two rivals, can at least come together, eat, talk, and laugh with each other. And so this letter came from somebody who I know. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of go through the letter. I'm going to make some responses to it. Of course, I'm going to keep this person completely anonymous. This is a person who I knew from one of my events. Just keep it that way. And I think the letter is very revealing and it's very touching. And so I want to first of all thank this person for sending this letter to me, because it really gives me a perspective to understand where people are in how they're approaching a vote. What influences them in the voting booth. And all I'm going to do is respond with as much as I can with Catholicity, with a Catholic perspective, as well as what I would just call critical thinking, because that sometimes doesn't happen as well. So I'm not criticizing this person's desire to vote for Kamala Harris, but I am going to challenge whether or not the person is actually integrating their faith or not. And then I'm going to give some principles so that we can check ourselves before we go into the voting booth. All right, so here it is. Dear Father Leo, I don't know if you remember me, and of course I remember this person. She says, I love you and the messages that you give. I'm a nurse, so some of the thoughts and beliefs are definitely for equality for all in all aspects of life. I know where this is going. I don't like the message that you sent about Kamala Harris not attending the Al Smith dinner. She has such a short time to run her campaign. I wish she would attend, but don't shame her because she is choosing not to face someone who calls her dumb, mentally retarded, clueless, etc. He is a misogynist individual who has no regard for women. I know you have a sister who I also met. I am sure that if someone disrespected her, you wouldn't stand for it. Well, I knew exactly where this was going, knowing that this person is in the medical field, and as soon as they talk about life for all in all aspects, I know that it really has something to do with abortion. But let's just keep going, and I'll just offer this thought. skipping this dinner was a poor choice on her part and her staffing. It's foolish because it does give people an opportunity to showcase who they are and not to be so scripted. I mean, again, Kamala Harris's 2.5 minute or 3 minute script using that Saturday Night Live character was just awkward. It wasn't funny. It makes her less approachable. And if this person is just angry at Trump because, I mean, we've heard this time and again, how Trump hates women. Well, it seems to me that the people on The View and Kamala Harris's party platform seems to really dislike masculine men. So it can't be understood that this decision of hers can't be criticized, because it can be. I mean, look, we all know that for years Trump was constantly criticized and he dealt with it. Does Kamala Harris have the wherewithal to deal with criticism? And I'm not shaming her. It's just simply a comment that this was a very, very bad choice. And her decision not to go because she's campaigning and having such a short time is really not a good excuse, simply because this would have been a great campaign opportunity for her. And honestly, it would have taken her just a couple hours to do so. Anyway, it's about the name calling. I'm not sure if that is a legitimate understanding. And why? Because again, I think Donald Trump has been called the worst names, and some of them have turned into lawsuits. And technically, I mean, he's been exonerated from many of them, just because you can call people names and it could be libelous and it could actually be correct. Who knows? You know, all I know is that he's been on trial since he became president, and he survived it all, and he was there. And what he had to say was not only kind of funny, some of it was actually very true. Now, to bring my sister into it is also a little disingenuous, because while you think that I wouldn't want to protect my sister, I know that my sister is strong enough. My sisters are strong enough to know that sticks and stones break my bones, names will never hurt me, and my sisters wouldn't be afraid to stand up to someone who might be bullying them. So it really shows that this is not coming from a source of strength, but a source of fear. And so in my mind, in my pastoral mind, I want to just say, please don't be afraid of words. Please do not be afraid of challenging ideas. I know that our world has just become so woke because of political correctness, and it's almost to the point where our freedom of speech is being taken away. We never want to say things that are offensive, but no one has a right to not be offended. There's going to be terrible things said about us all the time. And what we got to do is look at it in the eye and make our case. So let's go on. I agree that everyone has the right to vote their own conscience, but I feel that many of my Catholic brothers and sisters simply vote on the right to life issue and forget about all the people that the Republican candidate would be promoting. Right here, it shows that they think that there is kind of like a tie into politics and a religious party. And remember that for years, Catholics, for the most part, identified with the Democratic Party. That's just a given. And it's shifted because I think Catholics are starting to either discern that we can't be affiliated to a party and have that party represent our Catholic faith. It's got to be the opposite way. We have to have our faith be positive influences in no matter what political party you profess being affiliated with, or with which you are affiliated. Let me use good grammar, Catholic school education at its finest. And so I agree that to vote according to your conscience, but I also have to admit that I think a lot of people's consciences are completely deformed. I mean, How do I know that? It's because the majority of media leans a certain direction, and they absolutely despise this candidate, Donald Trump. And so it's almost like 24/7, Donald Trump lives rent-free in the minds of these people, and they've just developed such a hate for them, for this man and anyone else associated with him, that they've actually started to demonize anyone who is going to vote for Donald Trump. And some people might say, oh, you're doing the same thing with Kamala Harris. But I don't think that that's the case. And I know that because of the amount of misinformation, disinformation, propaganda, or I call psychological operation to see if the media says it, how many times will the American people start to believe it? Probably the most impressive example is the one where they said he's a racist because of a comment that he made about Charlottesville, Virginia, where he said there are good people on both sides. And that's all you heard. But if you just play the next 15 seconds, it says, and I'm not talking about those Nazis and those racists. They should be completely disavowed, completely. He completely disavowed them and condemned them. But you don't hear that from the media. In fact, President Biden said that in the first presidential debate, which showed that he was in such mental decline that they kind of ousted him and inaugurated or coronated Kamala Harris. And so we know that the media is out there to sow this disinformation. This person goes on, I am not pro-life, but I feel that it's very dangerous to legislate no abortions can happen at all. I agree. That's why the overturning of Roe versus Wade was a great thing. It was actually saying the federal government doesn't have this right to legislate one way or another and remand this responsibility back to the states. So I'm sorry, but your understanding of what the federal government is doing or not doing in response to abortion is kind of not the correct approach. We have to leave it up to the states. And then this person goes on using their medical background. Please note, my father is a medical doctor, but you don't have to be one to understand the basic facts of biology, as well as the morality that comes with the decisions for abortion. This person writes, there are medical issues, incest, rape, and the pro-life people love to say that abortions happen at birth. I have been a neonatal intensive nurse for so many years, and I've never heard this. Doesn't mean it doesn't happen, but that is 100% wrong in every case. So I'm not quite sure I understood this completely, but it is interesting that when people who identify as pro-choice, when they identify as pro-choice, or equivocate as a pro-choicer. They say they're pro-life, but except for in these cases, they always seem to go to the extreme cases of incest and rape. But the statistics on that is less than 1%. And we're going to get to the abortion part of this at the end of this monologue here. But abortions do happen at birth. I mean, sadly, Governor Tim Walz had legislation that really put it over the edge for me. The Catholic Register talks about how the reality of children surviving an abortion and provided comfort while they're dying, but not care to keep them alive. Life-saving efforts versus comfort care giving. And this kind of language from pro-abortionists like Tim Walz, like Kamala Harris, it's disturbing to me. We're going to talk specifically about abortion because I know exactly where this letter is coming from. And the letter goes on. Just because abortions are illegal doesn't mean that a woman or young girl is desperate not to be pregnant, isn't seeking out ways, in very unsafe ways, to end her pregnancy. That is true. Just because something is illegal doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. But I guess the faulty way of thinking about it is, are there really safe abortions? Are there? They might be a little bit more clinically clean in some places. You're not going to some back alley with that disgusting image of a wire hanger, for sure. But is it actually safe? Well, it's not for the baby. I can tell you that. And it's doing irreparable damage to the woman as well. And also great harm to society that wants to celebrate it. So again, abortion is not going to be illegal. Well, it can be illegal depending on the states, but the restrictions are there for the reason to kind of let people know abortions aren't just a willy-nilly thing that you can just do. It really takes a lot of effort to try to promote good thinking in society. And a free-for-all for abortions is just kind of giving an open door to a lot of problems when it comes to understanding abortion. Anyway, this person writes, I was one of those young girls who the decision was made for because we were on welfare and how I would take care of this baby. And this is sad to me, and I'm very sorry to hear that. And I'm grateful that you were willing to share that with me personally. And I understand that a decision to have a child is a big decision. A decision to terminate life shouldn't be casual. And the restrictions help people to understand the gravity of this situation. And this is sad to me because not only was a life taken, but it's even more sad that young women or women are forced to believe that they aren't strong enough to take care of a child in challenging situations. It saddens me that adoption wasn't a choice. It saddens me that money becomes the deciding factor about whether or not one can have a child. I know many, many families who are poor, but they welcome life and they are happy. It wasn't about money. It was about love, and it was also about responsibility. And so I understand that we're forced to believe this, that society is telling women to believe you're not strong enough to care for this baby, even if the man has left you. You know, the whole story of Les Miserables shows that women are strong enough to bring life into this world despite the challenges. And that if you ask for help, the church has always been there to do so. Planned Parenthood would never provide care for a woman. They just want to kill babies. And trust me, it is killing a baby. This person then writes, I will say that this has affected me and stayed with me till this day. And I feel that this is a part of the counseling that is missing, the consequences that form in your heart. And my comments is, yes, it is sad, but supporting candidates or supporting this pro-choice mentality isn't going to justify your pain. And giving permission for abortion doesn't solve any problems. It actually creates more problems. Why would we want that for women? Why don't we actually speak up like the women who regret their abortion? There's an organization of women who publicly say they've had an abortion and that they regret it, and that they are actually working to try to change the laws so that women don't feel so forced to have an abortion, but give them support and to give them strength, to let them know that, yes, a child is valuable and you don't have to make this decision that kills a baby. And then this person writes, at each of my beautiful children's birth, I felt I was going to be punished for having an abortion. Obviously, I was not in a healthy relationship with the Lord. And I'm so grateful that this person has hopefully reconciled. I don't know, because I'm not here to divulge confessions, but I just say this for anybody who's listening. Again, this person's identity is completely anonymous, but this is not an unlikely experience for women in today's world. And it breaks my heart that many don't have a good relationship with the Lord, and so they feel that the only choice they have is to go to a doctor who doesn't care about them, barely even knows their name, and just simply commits this murder of an unborn innocent child and leaves the woman in the recovery room. Sure, they might be kind to her, but as soon as she walks out the door, I can guarantee you there's not going to be a follow-up call. See how they're doing, if they need counseling. No, because people have become so callous to this idea. And I don't want to ever judge anyone's relationship with the Lord, but I can tell you that most of this act of abortion occurs in people who are fearful. And maybe they need to strengthen the relationship with the Lord before they make such a decision. She writes, if we had a society that really supported every unwanted child and their mother, then we could think further. We have to take care of the least of our brothers and sisters, which I know you believe. And they said, the person, right, that's what my whole mission with the restaurant and the food truck is all about. And I appreciate that. You know, this person who wrote to me is a very sincere person. I know this person well enough. I don't know everything, but well enough that we have a good relationship with each other. And so my words and my reflections are just simply a response to this, because I think this person wanted me to at least offer my response, and I thought I would do so. Unfortunately, we tend to make decisions on our beliefs, and that is very true. But I think our beliefs are sometimes formed by our consciences, which might not be fully formed. I will vote for Kamala Harris because it is an avenue where we can help so many people and not destroy them. And I completely disagree with you. And I just completely and firmly disagree that a candidate is going to give an avenue that's going to help people, especially knowing the track record of Miss Harris. She has not really helped anyone, to be honest with you. And she has been actually rather destructive with parts of the Constitution. And she even attacks Catholic organizations like the Knights of Columbus. I mean, I remember very clearly when she was asking Justice Kavanaugh about his Catholic identity and then challenging him on some allegations about him. It was really, really just one of the most dishonest kind of questions and very antagonistic. She was out to destroy this man and his reputation, and he is innocent. And yet she has a running mate who has many allegations against him. Her husband has allegations against him. You know, does that motto about that all victims should be taken seriously, is that still part of her ethos when it comes to these things? So I don't know about this, but this person writes, I will pray for those who have abortions, for their souls and their baby soul. But we cannot make decisions that we want people to do. We have to allow people to make their own decisions and help them through the consequences. And that is something I completely agree with. That's why I'm not telling you to vote for. But I am saying that one party is not providing us with a savior. A party is providing us with a politician, not a savior. And a politician is going to have many flaws, but it's their policies that matter, not their personality, not their vibe, not their public appearances, which are oftentimes very scripted to the point where it's awkward. So again, I'm not going to tell this person how to vote, but I can say, is voting for Ms. Harris a Catholic thing to do? I personally will give you the chance to make that choice yourself. And here's what I'm going to do. I provide for you a couple points for you to think about when going to the voting booth. Number one, check your feelings before you check your facts. Too often in this world, we see things completely different. I think the Bret Baier interview, which was supposed to be a half an hour, which was only diminished to about 15 to 20 minutes, is a real example of that. You have commentators who say that she completely bombed that interview. She just kind of babbled on and said the same thing she always says without really giving any substance to any of her claims. And it was all about saying that she wasn't Donald Trump, a terrible, hateful man. Then there are going to be people who love her and they say she did an amazing job, and you got to wonder which episode were they watching. But it really shows that our feelings are very easily manipulated. Our feelings tell us what we want to believe. And that's why you've got to check your feelings before you check the facts. So what do I mean by that? Make sure that you at least have an open mind to look at the facts with as much objectivity as possible. And so that means I sometimes watch news. People say, oh, you watch Fox News. No, I really don't. I honestly really don't. I watch more the mainstream media because it kind of makes me laugh, or at least video clips from the mainstream media, in very limited amounts of it, by the way, because it makes me laugh to see how much lying happens and are people believing it. Sadly, they are. And people's feelings are taking over. People have to know that you can present facts all you want, but if they just don't like a candidate, they're not going to even look at the truth. So what do we need to do? Check your feelings before you check the facts. Number two, please don't deify these candidates. They are, as Pope Francis says, they're both evil. Choose the lesser of the evil. I did an episode of that a couple weeks ago. No candidate is perfect. They are all flawed. But here's my question. Will any of them actually admit that they did anything wrong? I just want to hear that. Will any candidate actually say, please forgive me, I was misinformed. Please forgive me, I had this lifestyle before I came to my senses. Please forgive me, I opened up the borders. I dismantled good policies in an effort to destroy our country with 10 million illegal immigrants. If someone can make that apology publicly, that would actually give me more hope that I could vote for them and trust them, because they know they're not perfect. But every one of them, and I honestly have to say, the more someone comes across as perfect, the more likely they are being manipulated and they're not being themselves. At least with some candidates, you know exactly what they're thinking. With other candidates, they seem to always say the same thing, and you got to wonder, how honest are they being? Especially knowing that when they're off scripted, and honestly, that's probably one reason why a candidate is no longer deviating from the script. Because when that person does, they kind of go off and you can hear how they have flip-flopped. So don't deify the candidates. They are called to be servants. They are called to be servants. They work for us. And it is shocking that a middle-class kid can now be, I don't know, worth $1 billion. It's astounding to me how politicians who are supposed to be public servants can be so wealthy. The wealthier you are, the least likely that I really want to vote for you, to be honest with you. Number three, the candidates' records couldn't be any more different. So if you were to actually take side by side the websites of the different candidates, which I have looked at. One of them actually has policies that I can agree with, and then the other has policies that literally are coming out of socialism and communism. It's really, it's striking. It's striking how pro-American one candidate is and how seemingly wanting to destroy and upend American institutions the other is. And all you've got to do is look at them and see how different they are and which one satisfies you. If you want illegal immigration, you know who you're going to vote for. If abortion is more important to you than taking care of homeless vets, then we know who you're going to vote for. If upholding law and punishing criminals appropriately, not excessively for minor crimes, or sending the federal agents to a home because someone is a pro-lifer, come on. If upholding the law is what you vote for versus using the law and weaponizing against your political candidates and your rivals, then you know who you're going to vote for. I mean, clearly you already know who I'm talking about, and I'm not telling you who to vote for. I'm literally just kind of going through the differences, and it's going to be up to you. Don't trust me at this point. Go to the different websites yourselves and read. Literally, just read them. That's all I'm asking you to do to show that the records couldn't be any more different. Another thing to consider is the vice presidential candidate picks. I mean, again, they're not only talking about the different policies, but you're talking about the fact that should, God forbid, anything happen to any of the inaugurated presidents, then the vice president is going to take that office. And we have to just realize, do I want someone who calls himself a knucklehead, or someone who actually is the American dream, someone who was poor, who grew up very poor, but served his country in reality and not just because he was a knucklehead and he confused himself being in Tiananmen Square. I mean, like, the lying that has come from Mr. Walz is really astounding, and he's gotten away with it without any scrutiny. And at one point, J.D. Vance was considered, weird. But then as soon as he did such a masterful job in the vice presidential debates, and it was clear he did a masterful job in the vice presidential debates, they called him slick, like polished. So I want you to just think, if anything happened to those presidents, who would you want to be the next in line to be commander-in-chief? That is up to you. That is up to you. But I can honestly say that Tim Walz's record as governor is horrific in terms of abuses to children, in terms of the abuse of unborn children with regards to being such a pro-abortionist. And I can say that J.D. Vance, he's a convert to Catholicism. He's intellectually very rigorous, and he's articulate, and he's convincing. Some people, again, think he's fake, but then they also called him weird, and now he's considered slick. It just shows the media is out against a certain party. The majority of the media is. But the vice presidential candidates are another criteria that we need to think of. Here's another thing to consider. It's called rhetoric versus reality. I can honestly say that I cannot stand the way both candidates speak. I just don't like listening to any of them. This is my personal opinion. I just don't like listening to any of them. But the rhetoric is one thing. Their reality is proven by their actions. Proven by their actions. And the more scripted and edited someone is, or say, for example, the 60-minute interview. We all know that that was a terrible interview for Ms. Harris. But then the editors at 60 Minutes chopped it all up and made it sound way more coherent than the actual interview was. Versus Donald Trump, who's constantly being taken out of context and edited to discredit him. So the rhetoric is something that we've got to get past and just look at the reality of their record. Their record. And that's a big deal. Now let's get to the abortion. Because providing unfettered access to abortion isn't going to eliminate the problems. It actually creates more. It creates a mentality of permissiveness. And the reason why I do think restrictions on abortions are incredibly necessary. And yes, I would love for abortions to be illegal. I would like for abortions not to even be considered a thing, to be perfectly honest with you. But I would rather see us take on an approach from the European countries. They don't seem to have these issues like we have in America. You know, in Europe, they actually go through a large amount of criteria. They actually have requirements before a woman can procure an abortion. And so there should be real restrictions to abortion. I would personally love for it to be illegal across the board. But knowing the reality of the divided world in which we live and the brokenness and the fact that, as this person who wrote the letter to me, there are not enough institutions to care for women and children who are unwanted. I would love for abortions to just be completely not a thing. But between now and the time we get to a perfect world, I have to logically assume that there is going to be some abortions permitted. I just have to be realistic about it. But I don't want my tax dollars to go to it. I don't want Planned Parenthood to be the number one institution. I would rather have small, faith-based churches caring for women and their pregnancy, as well as Sisters for Life, for example, of New York City, and now hopefully growing so that they can share the care and the love that they have for women and children to show and empower women that it's okay. But this whole unfettered approach to abortion is just truly terrible. I liken the restrictions to abortion to the campaign that took place in the 70s and the 80s about how to put on your seatbelt, because, you know, people younger than me aren't going to remember that at one point we used to ride in cars without seatbelts. Can you imagine that? Seatbelts were not a requirement, but there was good laws and good campaigns to promote this law that now puts into people's minds that driving without a seatbelt is dangerous and it could lead to death. That is a good law. We need some of that. We need all of that goodness of that law in terms of the abortion question. But what's kind of interesting to me is that, you know, the person who wrote me the letter doesn't want the federal government to make these proclamations about what women can do with their bodies. And I agree with that. That's why we should remand it back to the states. But there should be efforts locally and federally that tells women that abortion hurts their hearts, their own hearts. It can actually mess with their minds. It's created more problems than solved problems. And if we think that children should be killed because of convenience, then what kind of world are we becoming? So this is where I just think we need to pay attention to how much emphasis we are giving to abortion as the topic. Here's another one. I got just two more and we're going to be done. Number 7. Start now with how you're going to react on the day after the election. If you're, or who knows, however long it's going to take people to vote. I remember when voting used to be able to happen in one day. I'm not quite sure why it's going into the wee hours at night when fact checkers and poll watchers can't get in there. It really does make me quite suspicious the way the 2020 elections were conducted, especially with the amount of interference that we saw with regards to the mail-in voting and, of course, technology, which can easily be hacked. So, regardless of whoever is going to be inaugurated, how will you react to it? Are you going to lose your mind and your soul? Or are you going to be able to just deal with it and move on? Or are you going to be the person, if your candidate wins, are you going to be happy and gloat and kind of like do the annoying dance just to kind of piss off your political opponent? Please don't do that. And if you're going to experience a loss the following day, are you going to burn down a city? Because all of those reactions have really showed that you aren't really taking your Catholic faith into the voting booth. We have to know that we're voting for a president, not our God. Figure that out. And number 8, the world is already divided. How are you going to bridge the divide? This is what a Catholic needs to do. Understand that voting is a serious duty, but it takes more than just the way you feel about a candidate or to vote because of your own personal experiences. It requires us to know that our personal experiences are only a part of it. We've got to vote for the public good and not just what's good for you, because that would be selfish. We got to vote for what would be good for the people. And if you can do that, then you can realize that the other person on the other side of the tracks, or the other person who's on the other side of your political aisle, they are still part of this country, and we need to treat each other with respect. So no matter who wins, I'll be honest with you, it's probably going to be another ugly 4 years. And it gets uglier and uglier. But here's how I'm going to end, with Psalm 103. And Psalm 103 basically talks about a choice of who you're going to serve, because that person, in a sense, is going to be what guides you, who serves us to get us through the difficult times. And Psalm 103 says, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." I hope that this gives you something to think about. I know this was a longer than normal episode, but it's something that I hope will help you to form your conscience. Again, I want to say thank you to the person who wrote to me and explained her reasons for her vote. And I'm not going to try to dissuade her, but I certainly have no trouble challenging her, because I think she wanted to let me know, because she wanted to challenge me and how she thinks I'm voting. But I never said who I'm voting for. And I'm not telling you who you should vote for. I'm just telling you how a Catholic can approach the voting booth. Maybe what you want to do is on election day, please go to Mass, say a rosary, read the scriptures, pray, 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 be informed, go vote, pray again. Hope this helps. God bless you. Make sure you like, subscribe, share, and comment, as well as join us on our Patreon community so that we can continue to dish out faith, culture, and commentary. God bless you, and stay hungry for God.